Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's Neuron Solution podcast. I have two guests with me, Mr. Levente Szabados and Mr. Kovács Gyula. Would you please introduce us, guys, and why you guys are relevant for today's AI space?
Yes, I mean, it's an interesting thing to be introducing myself after so many years of AI. Actually, the last 15 years, we've been doing AI in some form when it was absolutely uncool. Currently, I'm teaching at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, teaching AI-related subjects like deep learning, as well as executives to apply AI. But as in my current position, I'm a co-founder and lead scientific advisor of Neuron Solutions. So I think we can pride ourselves a little bit in the fact that when it was absolutely not cool, we've been trying to dig this technology a little bit out of the unknownness, but now that it is known, we are super happy to talk about it.
Yeah, I'm the other co-founder of Neuron Solutions. I'm not so deep in the technology as Levente is. I started to deal with AI when I joined or established the company Neuron Solutions. That was 7 years ago. But before that, I rather concentrated on the enterprise environment, applying different kind of technologies, mainly in the telco sector, but so many others. So I'm coming from the enterprise side. But nowadays, I also teach together with Levente. I feel myself entitled to teach others, even with this small amount of 7 years or something experience. In this technology, it means something, I think.
I think you're absolutely right. But before, there is a big question that there is a lot of hype around it and a lot of misinformation. Can you guys tell us what is exactly an AI agent and how we come to this? So what are the foundations of this AI agent?
Interestingly enough, the concept of an agent is not new. Actually, it's coming from nearly 4 or 5 decades ago. But the realization, the actualization of it was really complicated. So when we are talking about AI agents, we think of some kind of system that has the ability to plan and execute some difficult tasks more autonomously than just us telling it what to do. Now, this was kind of a pipe dream for a long enough time because we actually were not stuck in the execution side. We could do some systems that went on and executed tasks as we defined the tasks. The novelty is that now we are using large language models, the chatbot type things that are able to very entertainingly answer your conversational questions, but we use them very specifically to plan ahead. And this planning and execution type of activity, when I don't tell you what to do as a system, but I give you the task to figure out the steps, how to achieve a certain goal, this is the so-called agentic behavior that we are so happy about in case of large language models. So I think the shortest definition is currently what we call an AI agent is some kind of semi-autonomous system that uses large language models for planning and taking action.
And there is several marketing hypes around what these agents can do and what's science fiction and what is not. Could you please tell us a little bit about what we consider that is solved, and this is the direction we are going? What could be the industry standard, like video cards, or with the Windows operating system, and what is considered that it's an open question, and we don't know it yet, but we are very curious to find out.
There are certain capabilities that we are now seeing that they are stable enough that we can rely on. For example, this basic setup of I give you some kind of tasks and please come up with the ideas that you would take as steps of action. This is looking like fairly reliable currently. So think step by step, or this kind of activity when you try to decompose a problem. What is not that reliable is that following a long trajectory of really doing this task. So not being forgetful about what was it that I wanted to do in step number 27, which is all the more funny because that's the same type of error that us humans are plagued by, in the sense of you are pretty good at doing a to-do list for yourself. You're not that good at following the to-do list when it's 22 steps long. So the whole long horizon following of these reasoning steps or following along the plan is the shakier part. So actually what we are into is reliability. We want to somehow see that there is this big potential that we can just give out a task to some autonomous system and we wait and then we just check the final result and be happy about it. We are not yet there that this is reliably happening. In many cases it does, but there is this stochastic element that's making it a challenge to take a business process and say that I now define this agent and it will take over the whole business process for me. Somehow, currently, as of today, we have to design a system by periodically checking in and periodically trying to keep it on track. So it is not yet a full-fledged employee. It is something like an intern. Same with an intern. You are not typically saying like, please, dear intern, plan your days ahead, go away, come back in 2 weeks, and then report at your final result. That's not what's happening with an intern. In an intern, you need some extra guidance that you will have to somehow systematically engineer into a system that takes this guidance and runs with it. Vice versa, it is not a good system if the system is constantly nudging you like, hey, I want to do this, can I, may I? That's not the good type of intern that you wish for yourself, because there should be some kind of autonomy, but also controllability. This is one of the horizons that we are very strongly trying to pay attention to when we are designing these systems. Other horizons, maybe just a little bit more science fiction-y, is that one of the particular problems of planning is planning in space. You do this instinctively. When you say that you want to exit that door right over there, you have this instinctive planning of you just, first I will have to stand up and then go there and then move my right arm and then put it on the lever and so on. And that's how you exit. This is totally not a simple task in physical space, even for a current large language model. So there is fundamentally deep research that is being done that tries to enable, beyond the verbal planning ability, these physical planning abilities, so that a robot or any body can plan and navigate unknown environments. So the robotics part is, I wouldn't say science fiction, but it's yet in the 1, 2, 3 year future to be as reliable, even to try. So it's a little bit less mature.
But being frankly, I think Levente showed rather the scientific view of that. I would rather show the everyday life view of that we have much, much more questions than answers. I see that in that way. The concept itself, being agentic, having this autonomous behavior, I think that is solid. But how to apply that in the real world, that is not solid at all. And we have many, many questions about that. Just mentioning one thing, these agents, as Levente mentioned, mainly based on large language models. And what is the best thing in large language models? That you can ask anything, you can make them do things in various fields, but the same is the problem. They can answer anything. They can do almost anything, and it's very hard to control that. And that's the problem also with the autonomous agents, that how autonomous they should be, how we define autonomy, how we frame the autonomy, what we expect from them and what we expect them not to do. And that part in the application is not yet there. We are just really just scratching the surface. And there is another, that is one thing, the control of the autonomy. The other thing is that whether we like or not, like God created us on his own image, we try to do the same with the agents and the machines in general. And if you look at that, there is one thing is still missing from this LLM-based agentic concept, is the experience and the memory. And that part what we use every day. Yes, it's partly in the models, but the specific personal, in quotation mark, personal experience like we have, human, how we can implement that in an agent, how an agent can have an experience or some kind of personal memory or something like that. Not just technically, but from process point of view or operation point of view. I think that is a significant part where we don't know yet even not the direction. So the concept is solid, I agree, but the details and especially the application is far not matured.
And this is all the more interesting because I think just using LLMs as commodities, it became a commodity. Yeah. So it's currently, I don't think that anyone can claim that it is a competitive advantage that his or her organization is using a large language model. Basically, everyone does.
Yeah.
So actually, the next frontier of trying to be really competitive and having a distinctive advantage in this field is to take your specific organizational experience, the real knowledge that is somehow scattered around in your organization, and infusing that to these large language model based agents, which is a really complicated task in the sense of you have to be aware of what you have. Maybe it's not written, maybe it's not explicit, maybe your people know something, how to do a certain task, and it is a distributed knowledge, but there is no handbook that describes what is the ideal procedure for your research task or your development task or any of these. So I think the big question will be for organizations is to get a feel for this knowledge that they have, their capital, and infuse it into some kind of systems. And what is, I agree, not mature yet, is the methodologies or the tools from the IT side and the methodologies to transfer this knowledge.
If I understand you correctly, this is one, if we can do that, we can move from having an intern to having like a senior expert in my team.
Or at least maturing that intern more and more, because most probably it's not just one step. It's a gradual development, I believe.
And in terms of the business side, you guys have mentioned some very interesting topics, but how can we infuse, or what is actually personal knowledge that we can infuse into these agents? How can we do that?
Just think about LLMs. Large language models trained on a collective knowledge. We gathered a lot of data from the world, around the world, and we fed them that data to the models. But for a company or an enterprise, that's just part of the need. They need their own enterprise collective knowledge, which is specified or specific to that enterprise. And the question is how we, on one hand, narrow it down, on the other hand, collect, store, and then query somehow or use that kind of company-specific collective knowledge. And as we go from the words collective knowledge to the companies, then we can go further. A smaller group within the company. These 5 guys doing the work like this, or this is their typical behavior, or this is their typical concepts, how they do. Or we can go even deeper, saying that this expert, and now we are at the stage where we start to think about digital twins. We have an expert who has a good knowledge, has a huge experience from the past. How we create a digital twin in order to feed that information into an agent, being able to help or sometimes even work on behalf of someone.
This is interesting because we will be both talking at a conference of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences about knowledge management in a good week. And there, I think there is a good distinction between knowledge that is explicit. Someone wrote it down. You can take it from somewhere, you know ideally where it is, and you can feed it to, say, a system that retrieves it and feeds it to the large language model. But there is another part, which is the tacit knowledge, which is somewhere, somehow in the behavior of people, in the heads of people, which is not made explicit by any document. And I think currently both of these approaches has to be taken. So you have to build some kind of system for being able to access explicit knowledge, but that's not enough. You will need to build a process of continual learning into your agents so that the tacit knowledge of your people is being incorporated to their behavior.
And I think there is one more, let's say, important aspect to apply agents. I mean, apply them in a useful and efficient way, is that we have built our companies, actually our whole life, about known resources and capabilities. Like just think about an enterprise process. It is built around the available resources. You have this amount of people, this kind of competence, this kind of tools, whatever, and you know the limitations of your company. You cannot have hundreds of people in the process because you know that from economical point of view, it doesn't make sense. When you bring in agents, that is one way to do it, just simply replace or aid certain parts of the process with those agents. But if you want to make a real change or a real development or a revolution on that, you might think about completely redesign your, not just process, the whole enterprise, because with agents, you have completely different resources. An agent can do capacity-wise and sometimes even competence-wise much more than the human could do in that certain position. Then it raises the let's say the concept or the possibility to completely redesign the process. We would do it completely differently if we have such resources an agent can offer. And that's an interesting question, whether are we there? Do we know anything about those resources? I mean, the capabilities of the agent and the capabilities of a human, which should be also part of this in order to redesign the whole process. And I think we are not there yet. We just realize that it is coming.
Actually, that's a good point to mention that there is this funny saying that quantity has a quality of its own. So that's an interesting case of we thought of some tasks as being fundamentally limited by the computational capacity that we have. And there are these famous scaling laws that people study in large language models. There was this classical scaling law of more data, more computation to the training, and then the large language model will get smarter by default. But that's not the only scaling that we observe. We observe that letting an agent or some kind of more autonomous setup of a large language model think longer for a longer while or a longer period, do more computation, is absolutely feasibly scaling things up. And that's the second level. The third level of scaling is a bit like organizational scaling, in the sense of taking multiple roles, say an analyst, a programmer, a tester, agent, and defining them to cooperate somehow. And there is a new type of efficiency that emerges because of this large-scale cooperation. So as we have this scaling law from the scientific perspective of we can design these roles and scale the problem solving with them, that kind of points to the HR question of, but then we will have to hire and have a full life cycle management for these kind of semi-autonomous entities, which are the new employees.
And as we talk as we talk about the new employees, Levente just mentioned these specialists and generalists. And if we go back to the early machine learning years, let's say, where we started the whole story long ago, first we started to create specialists, sometimes simple models, to do a certain task. And now, as foundation models appeared, large language models appeared, we a bit turned to the generalists, like ChatGPT is the typical generalist. But then when we started to deal with agentic, again, we have a chance to go to the specialists, which is again an organizational question, how you organize your own enterprise or company. In which case, which one is the best? I mean, having good generalists or having some specialists, what makes you more efficient? And that question, we had that with human, and I think it comes back with the agentic. And I would go even further. It will come back in a hybrid organization as well, where part of the resources will be agents and part of the resources might be human still. And then how you optimize that between these two options, having this kind of resources and that kind of resources.
And from a management perspective, what do you guys think? What are the new kind of challenges for leaders to actually, first of all, how you can work well with agents, and second of all, how you can work with your people who are using scalable agents? Is there any change in the way you manage and you work with these agents and people, or it's going to be something similar than what we are having right now? What is your opinion on the topic?
I think we should think of 3 levels of adoption. One level of adoption is basically a personal productivity level adoption. Fun fact, as the classical computer era innovations, or even sometimes the internet-based innovations were a little bit top-down from the organization side. Of someone said that we have to adopt it, or an ERP system. Someone told us to adopt it, and then it went down. Currently, large language model usage is bottom-up. Is that personal productivity? No one told me to use it, but I use ChatGPT for this and that and that and that in my organizational life. So there is this baseline level of personal productivity that a leader has to enable. So I think it has to be organized in the sense of having good, compliant access to models, having a behavioral code of, yes, you can do it, you should do it, but do it like this, and that's safe. So that's a ground level of a leadership challenge.
Let me give a note to that. The leader's task is not just to enable it, because it is coming anyhow. So not just enabling, but controlling, managing that. Just think about that. Levente mentioned the ERP introduction. When we started to introduce ERP systems, there was no threat that someone brings his or her own ERP in the pocket because I want an SAP with me. That was not a feasible option. Now, if the manager or the leader does not really follow this, it still happens, just without control. So it's not just an enabler, it's a must to deal with. It's called sometimes shadow AI, and there are so many phrases for that, but it is coming. So I fully agree with that. Now it's a different situation. It is really coming from the bottom up, and we need to somehow take care of that.
And beyond that, there is this middle layer where I would say that's the business process optimization. That's a classical management task of doing what we do, but because we have now new tools, much of it can be automated, much of it can be optimized, and the business processes has to change to accommodate these new tools. So there is a lot of work in this middle layer of taking what we have and rethinking it in terms of like new processes and new procedures that has to be done. But I think the real challenge is the third layer, the so-called business model disruption layer that Gyula was already mentioning a little bit, is that should you do the same thing? Should you deliver the same type of value to the market currently as you did a year ago? Should you be the same company selling the same things to the same people? Or because of agents, or because of your specific knowledge and the capability to form them to scalable agents, should you be doing something else? Maybe your data or your expertise or your knowledge is such an amount valuable that you can change what you sell. Instead of being a provider for something on a fee basis, you will come up with a new product that has enabled AI in it. Instead of B2B, you maybe go to B2C, or vice versa. There are these really fundamental open spaces that are really strategic challenges. So that's, I think, the third level where leadership has to operate, to have enough foresight that you will have to change the organizational value proposition with the new possibilities. Now, you could ask, how the heck do you know how technology will evolve in 1 or 2 or 3 years? There is this big uncertainty, and so on and so on. I think in this, that is a good advice. What is coming actually from OpenAI and Sam Altman is that rely on the fact that this won't get worse. This will just get a little bit better. Maybe much better, maybe a little bit better. That doesn't matter. If you design with that in mind, that, okay, now I can do this activity with the current models 80% good, then you can pretty reliably anticipate that in 1 or 2 years, it will be more close to 100%. So you will have to be a little bit forward-leaning or a little bit optimistic about what technology can achieve, so that you're not always constantly just running around and trying to catch up with things that are already, oh, this can be done, I have to adopt it. That's you being always behind the curve.
And it is always a challenge for a management. And interestingly, it's especially a challenge for companies which work well. It's typical, it's called innovator dilemma. if you have a well-working organization, a well-working business, very much optimized, you are good at the market, whatever, what makes you change it? What's the incentive to make a disruptive innovation in that? And we have seen in the history that it could make sense to do it, but we have seen also in the history that sometimes it goes wrong. So that here comes the leadership or the management responsibility to see that clearly and let's say follow those kind of advices like Sam Altman in order to navigate in this era.
And what you guys mentioned, it requires a lot of experimentation and innovation, both from employees and leaders. But generally, companies are not very good at that, to foster environment that requires experimentation and innovation. Do you guys think who will get ahead, or how can you do this kind of environment to make people actually want to try this stuff and want to get ahead of the curve, as Levente mentioned, and not just catching up all the time?
Well, actually, I think there is no shame in admitting that you don't know a certain thing. So let's get this out of the way. I don't think that currently someone exists who knows everything about AI models. We know a lot, and we gather a lot of experience. The more areas you try to apply these things, the more experience you get. I don't think that you would have to be kind of emotionally shocked by the fact that you don't know everything. No one knows everything. There has to be a process of figuring out. And this process of figuring out and being brave enough to figure out is, I think, the key. Is that you have to start with two things. First, dedicating enough awareness and enough resources that you start experimenting with things. And many of them will fail. But that's not a problem. That's how you learn. That's how you figure things out. Well, if you are not wanting to bootstrap this by just you going there and trying things quite randomly or semi-randomly, then you can rely on expertise from the outside. Not a surprise, we are kind of trying to give a help in this, in the sense of we already saw a lot of things working and helping, and we try to get this bootstrapping phase a little bit shorter by saying that, look, we can have either expertise from the organizational / behavioral sense, but also some technological tools that we already tried, and we know that maybe that combination doesn't work too ideally. So it would be rather interesting to do it a little bit differently, and we can kind of shorten the experimentation pain. But the experimentation pain is never zero. This is not a thing that we a priori know or can know. No one can know. This is what innovation is. I mean, that's why we love it and that's why we hate it, that it's new, radically new in the sense of it will emerge as with this trial and error procedure.
And Levente mentioned a few phrases like increasing the awareness, acquiring competence, experimenting on that. And I would summarize that in a very single sentence that the biggest fear is the unknown. And here the task is to discover that unknown. And a company can do steps toward that, to discovering what is in that dark room, because that it might be beautiful. Just you need to be brave to step in carefully, of course, but still that kind of, let's say, commitment to that discovery, I think that's very important.
Thank you very much, guys. We are at the end of our conversation. I have only one last question to each of you, that because it's the fear of the unknown, what would be one big advice that you can give to organizations and leaders to how can you navigate this new time, and what should you do to make your organization future-proof?
I think there are always in every organization people who are not just afraid of the unknown, but thrilled about the unknown. I think you have to find those people. And there is always a risk associated with it, but I think we really overestimate the risk. Currently, the barrier of entry for these technologies is rather low. You don't have to buy millions and billions worth of hardware. You don't have to build up huge 100-man teams to do things. Just find the people who are not shocked by things that they don't know, but who get curious and who want to get moving.
I can add only that every journey starts with a single step. So take that step, and not just a step, you might think about a small jump. And it's up to you to decide how brave you are, just taking a small step or taking a small jump, but anyhow, take it. That's the advice.
Thank you very much, guys. It was a great discussion, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.